So, Ralph, you have the unenviable task of explaining and expounding to me the merits of choir singing and classical music. What is it about those two things which captivated you so much that you've dedicated your whole life to them?
Right. Well, first of all, I will talk about music. I don't want to say classical music because it's a silly category. What does it mean? Some people say elite, and all that sort of stuff. I just am interested in good music. My father absolutely loved Gershwin and played wonderful Gershwin songs. And my mother loved Tchaikovsky and used to play all the Tchaikovsky symphonies. All of that, and Beethoven, my father loved Beethoven Fourth Piano Concerto, and I more or less know it off by heart and loved it. We used to go and buy Beatles records. There were four brothers and sisters at the time, five brothers and sisters eventually. And we used to go and buy the latest Beatles. And so things like Yesterday, absolutely, what a good piece, so many good pieces by the Beatles. So the only categorization I can think of for music is good or bad. But I mean, who are you, Ralph Allwood, to say what is good music? I'd say you, Joe Riley, can say what good music is and bad music. Everyone I can see walking along the road outside here can say what they think is good music and bad music. That's a subjective decision. Gradually over the years, we get left to us the Bach B minor Mass. There's no way people will stop listening to the Bach B minor Mass because it's complete genius. It's just wonderful. The first, I can hardly speak now. The first bar just sends me alone. But similarly with Gershwin, how about Summertime? What a stunning song that is. So that's the first. That's the first question. The second one is singing. Well, when I was at school, I was lucky enough to be at a wonderful state school, Tiffin in Kingston, where the very enterprising head of choir booked St. Paul's Cathedral and took us, a whole huge school choir, to sing The Dream of Gerontius. He booked an orchestra. How he paid for it, I just don't know. And the top soloists of the day, some of whom he knew. And he was a great man, John Walker, and we all sang our heads off. So at the bit at the end of Dream of Gerontius, go in the name of angels and archangels. I will always remember that. I didn't know at the time that it is a glorified interrupted cadence, which is then done in sequence, and then in a three-part sequence, and then there's a diminished seventh leading to a grand finale of that effect. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that I absolutely loved singing it. So no categories, please. Singing is a way of taking part in this beautiful music. And also, actually, it has a good physical effect because when you breathe deeply, that is a way. I've just been listening to the good Michael Mosley in his last talk, and it's a very, very good way indeed of relaxing, and it sends itself right down. And when you sing, of course, you breathe deeply, but of course, you also breathe at the same time as the people next to you, and there's a wonderful feeling of teamwork. So there you go.
That feeling you were talking about there as a young boy at St. Paul's on that last note you're singing. Do you see any distinction between the feeling in which you felt there than a similarly young girl at a Taylor Swift concert? Is there any difference, do you think, in that pure emotion that comes from the heart and the soul?
That's a very, very good question. And I think in many ways, both are joy. I think the Taylor Swift one, I could say, supposing she listened under the same circumstances and been given the same hype and the same publicity, and listened to Dream of Gerontius at the same time, whether that would be an enhanced effect. Well, actually, that test would be impossible to stage, so I probably can't even answer that. But I would I'm very pleased she is so happy and goes to her Taylor Swift. I'd love her to do some other music as well and to learn better stuff. Better. You know what I mean.
So you see it then as, not to use the term classical, just good music. You were saying there, is that superior, do you think, or is it purely subjective?
For me, it is superior, but for other people, another one will be superior. But I prefer the term classics in music because I think Yesterday by the Beatles, am I allowed to go and play it to you? Just the beginning.
This is a podcasting first. Ralph has just got up from his chair. It's off his piano.
Here it is. Here we go. That moment, that chord is superb. It's just amazing. Now, we bought that single, as it was called in those days. We bought that single, We Brothers and Sisters, way back in the early 60s. And since then, I'm pleased to say, recognized it as superb music. Since then, everybody's remembered it. When I played it to you, you knew it. Everybody knows it Yesterday because it's such a powerful piece. Well, that's what I mean. So that is a classic in music. So I much prefer classics in music. So the Bach B minor mass is a classic in music. People say, "Oh, it's a classic." I love the way people say classic. But then when they say classical music, they say, "Oh, it's posh." Posh? What do you mean by posh? Da 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 da. Dwa, 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 dwa. It's meaningless. It's just good. And people have agreed over the years it's good. So more and more people have performed it and kept it going and gone to those concerts. And the concerts they don't like, they haven't turned up to. So the promoters won't choose that piece next time. That's the way good music is defined. I couldn't define it myself. It just happens. And is it superior? Yes. Yesterday is superior to something we've forgotten that was written at the same time by a less good band, etc. If it makes you feel better, it's superior. But some things are superior for me, and they'd be different for you. Something else would be superior for you.
So then, do you agree with the naming of the radio station Classic FM? Because it's Classic FM and not Classical FM.
That's a very good question. I actually would quite like a radio station that just happened to play all my favorite music. We now have that, don't we? Because we have a playlist. But some of the playlists available are really annoying because I say, no, I don't like that. I know your reasoning. I get your reasoning, but I don't like that as well. Don't play me that. And then just when you're listening to a symphony, it stops after the first movement. It gives you something else that it thinks you will like. Sorry, dearest, I don't like that. I'd much prefer to choose. But playlists are getting there, and I'm sure they'll become more sophisticated as time goes on, and they'll be able to read my mind.
What would you say then is the song in which moves you the most?
Oh, wow! I'm the one song which I suppose it would have to be Schubert. Something like "Who is Sylvia" as Schubert. Oh, is just amazing and so powerful. Schumann, Ich grolle nicht. Shall I just play the opening?
Yes, go for it. While we're here, we might as well.
Here we go. Ich grolle nicht. And so on. I could go on to the end, but that Schumann, ich grolle nicht. I'm not moaning. He's saying, I'm going to carry on, even though this is a very ghastly thing to happen. I'm determined to carry on. When I was a teenager, I stopped having piano lessons, and I then played about 4 times as much as I had done before, because I didn't have to practice a certain thing. I don't advocate it, but that happened to be right for me. And I had a rule that I got to play everything in all keys, and I'm so pleased I did, because that helped me learn keys, and I love keys. I used to, if I played something like that in one key and absolutely loved it, I would then get renewed pleasure from playing it in another key. I'm so easily pleased.
So say someone's listened to this, they say, well, that sounds great. What would be the top 3 songs in which Ralph would prescribe a newbie to classic music to listen to?
What I know, I don't want to call it classical music. Should we say music written more than 100 years ago or something?
Let's do it. Yeah, we call that.
Yeah, because it's had more than 100 years to stay with us. So it's got to be pretty good. Otherwise, it would have been ditched years ago.
That's a pretty good litmus test, really, isn't it?
Yes. Well, Gershwin's 1930s, so we're nearly up there. Am I allowed to include Gershwin? Because
it's your own rule that you're breaking, Ralph.
Yeah, I mean, Summertime is just...
It's often the piano again.
And so on. And then the end, it does this. So definitely Gershwin Summertime is one of them. Ich grolle nicht is... You did ask me for the 4 songs.
3, but we can stretch to 4. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Actually, I like ABBA as well. I would include a couple of, maybe Waterloo, because the harmony of the first 2 chords is so clever. Cleverness is not necessarily the criterion, of course, but it is clever because it knows what's going to be good. And then so much more. Who is Sylvia of Schubert is just stunning music. Plenty of Brahms songs, and I always find them difficult to call to mind. Of course, over there you can't see, there are shelves of songs, so I could grab them. And of course the Britten arrangements of things like Down by the Sally Gardens, genius Benjamin Britten. So Down by the Sally Gardens and things, and Tchaikovsky, some Tchaikovsky songs which are None But the Lonely Heart. I know it in English. I can't remember the Russian. I certainly can't pronounce it. Is absolutely superb, devastatingly sad. And actually, sad music is often the one we choose as a favourite. Why is that? Answer: I've got the answer to everything. The reason I think that sad music is so powerful is that one of my sisters, once said to me, "You do know how best to cheer up children." She said the best way, if a child comes to you absolutely depressed and distressed and distraught, the first thing you do is sympathize. You just say, "I know, I've been there myself. I know how you feel. And oh yes, I fell over once. Oh, it's horrible when you cut your knee, isn't it?" Or whatever. And so sad music is that. It's sympathizing. It's getting down to where you can be in a sad state and saying yes. And it's making something wonderful of it. Oh, and of course, that reminds me of the saddest song in the world, which is it's from the Matthew Passion, the one where Peter has denied Christ, and Barmer Dich, it's called. It's absolutely astonishing piece of music. Again, it's lasted, and the Matthew Passion has lasted, in spite of the fact it takes about 3.5 hours, and it's still thought of as a wonderful piece. So that's pretty certain it must be.
What about the British national anthem? What are your views on that? Because a lot of people aren't that much of a fan and say, oh, it should be Jerusalem instead, or it should be this, that, and the other. What do you think from a musical point of view?
That's a very good question. And actually, I do wish that Parry had written the national anthem, because he would have come up with something better than. Now, of course, I admire Thomas Arne, who wrote our national anthem. It's not as he wrote it. The tune is actually dum 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 da 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 dum dee dum da 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 dee 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 da dum da dum, and then dee 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 dee. So it's quite different, and I think it's slightly better in its old.
It's like through the years, then have we smoothed over the
Yes,
different
yes,
notes?
we got it wrong and copied each other and then forgot, and all that. And when we used to do it every now and then at Eton, and we all sang the proper original version of Arne. Everybody learned it. And but no, I do. I think Jerusalem is absolutely superb. Of course, the wonderful thing about Jerusalem is that Parry was asked to write something to rejuvenate spirits in the First World War. And so, it's a superb piece for rejuvenating spirits. But he thought, I don't want to feel I'm praising war. Okay, we need to rejuvenate spirits. But so, why don't I find a text by William Blake, who was a pacifist? And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's. And so William Blake was a pacifist, and all those words are pacifist. And well, not they don't espouse pacifism, but that they are of a pacifist, which I absolutely love. But he loved it himself, and there's the great story of him when he directed the Royal College of Music. He was devastated by the loss of life in the First World War, and he insisted on putting up notices of students who died himself and pinning them to the wall. He'd write them and pin them to the wall every day, and he was always in tears when he pinned those things to the wall. And that's when he wrote the Songs of Farewell and 6 Songs of Farewell, which are stunning pieces. I so enjoyed recording those. I've forgotten the question. I've gone off the subject.
We're just talking about the national anthem in general.
Oh, yeah, the national anthem. And he came in one day when he thought he'd finished writing Jerusalem, and his friend Stanford was there, the composer Stanford was there. And he came excitedly into his room and said, I've changed it. And I've changed it. Bring me my bow of burning gold. The second verse, bring my arrows of desire. Bring me my spear. It used to go, oh, clouds unfold. And he changed it to bring me my spear. Oh, clouds unfold. And he was terribly pleased with it. Nowadays, we all enjoy that bit, don't we? Oh, clouds unfold. Well, he just thought that up the second day. Came in and told his friend Stanford. But there's so many good pieces by Parry, like I Was Glad, which just expresses such wonderful emotion. The words are slightly wrong, actually, of it, because the Old Testament made mistakes sometimes in translation. And it should be not our feet shall stand, but our feet now stand, because it's going to somewhere you've been promised. And he used to practice the piano in my house, not when I was there, but in where I lived in Eton. Happened to be a place which was attached in those days to a boy's house, and they used to go and practice the piano in that room. So I could think, I'm now playing the piano in the same room as Parry did when he was a boy at Eton. Brilliant. And there is a picture of him at Eton when he was captain of the football.
So that linking of history and place with you currently singing, or certainly leading a choir in their singing? It must be so satisfying on so many levels to be involved in something in which you love, but then also in settings, churches, chapels, cathedrals, that are so awe-inspiring and have lasted for so long.
Correct. Well, I didn't have the privilege of singing in a cathedral as a child. This country is astonishing for the opportunity it gives to boys and girls aged 7 and upwards to go and sing in cathedrals for several times a week, and during their term time. And in all my time, I've known loads and loads of children who've done that and then gone on to sing. And not one of them has ever said, if I'd done a bit less singing, I might have done better in my exams. Not one. The reverse is the case, and everyone who does it knows it, that when you sing, it makes you so much better, disproportionately better at doing all sorts of other things. So we really need to encourage people to do that. And actually, I've done that in Pimlico here with the vicar. The vicar and I started a thing called the Pimlico Musical Foundation, because none of the primary schools did singing when I first got here. Amazing. And now they all do, because we get people to support it and support singing teachers coming into the schools to teach them. And I'm very keen to transfer that to other places, other cities, and other appropriate places where the same thing could be done.
Do you find then, when you are singing in these places, do you actually ever have a chance to look up and take in the atmosphere and the ambience? Or are you so enraptured with what you're doing that it's hard to in the present?
That's a very good question. Psalm 121 says, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. Okay. Now, again, they get tenses wrong. It means really I should lift up. Why don't I lift up mine eyes unto the hills? Because so many people tell you, one of the things, if you're depressed or just a bit sad, simple 2 words, look up. You look up to beautiful things. You look up to the sky. You look up to the tops of trees, which tend to be a little bit more beautiful than the bottoms of trees. You see flowers. You see people's faces and people's eyes. But also there's something about that with the human posture, which is better than that. Why? Don't know. But it certainly is, and everyone recognizes it. So looking up is so important and so good, and it's the first stop therapy, really. And I had the enormous privilege of singing in King's Choir, Cambridge, for a year under the great Sir David Wilcox. And every day I went in there, my first thing as I went in there was to look up and see the glorious roof, unbelievable Gothic, vaulted ceiling. Yeah. And then we're singing as well. Yes, I think I did look up actually, but I know what you mean. It's easy to forget and look at your music and be worrying about things. But every now and then look up. And one of the places I have the privilege of producing music at is the Old Royal Naval College Chapel in Greenwich, one of the most beautiful buildings in London. And again, Christopher Wren, genius. How did he come up with that design? There's nowhere else like it. It's really amazing. And when during term time, we do our Monday evensongs at 5:30. And we have to persuade people that they can come in, because they think, oh, do we have to pay? No, it's evensong. You don't have to pay. Please come in, listen. Oh, we're not Christian. We're not religious, It doesn't matter. Just come in, sit down, listen, love it, lift up this business of I'm not religious. You know that one. People say I'm not religious. I remember the best uttering of that was I heard someone on the radio say, I stepped out on the road and, oh my God, a car came. Now, I'm not religious, but at that moment I said a prayer and I yelled at the radio, you are religious. Sorry, we all accept that there's a great mystery, and if we pray to it every now and then, yeah, it might work. anyway, I mean, you in a building like that, you just have to sort of give thanks. Who to? Doesn't matter. We love giving thanks. We love saying thank you. And, you look around and you say, thank you for this. Thank you, architects. Thank you, builders. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, God, if you like.
I was recently reading about John Ruskin, who said that architecture and buildings need to represent a sacrifice of sorts to get their value. So either through the length of time in which a building takes to build needs to be costly, so several decades, or even the actual outset of the cost, it needs to be expensive. And through the combining of those two things, then you get something which is to marvel at. Would you agree with Ruskin on that one?
How very interesting. I've just, about half an hour ago, been listening to Michael Mosley, one of his last talks. What an amazing man. And he was talking about happiness, and that if it's difficult to do something and you achieve something, that's one of the essential ingredients of being happy. So if you work hard at something, children, if you have to climb up somewhere to go and get a sweet, like that sweet better than the one that that you just grab off the table, in a hugely more significant way, the thought that of the years and years that it took to build King's College Chapel, without the kind of cranes we've got now and without the amazing equipment, and the achievement itself is part of the glory. That's what he meant, wasn't it? And everybody recognizes it. For example, they'd only half finished it and needed some more. In King's Chapel at the West End, there's still the chest in which Henry VIII sent money to finish it. Okay, you couldn't just say, "Oh yeah, £16 billion." There you go. It had to be contained in a massive chest, which was taken in a coach with lots of horses and guards and things, all the way down from Hampton Court or wherever it was, and there it was. They kept the chest which had contained the pieces, which was necessary to pay everybody to finish off King's Chapel, and that's an achievement as well.
If we look at architecture, and certainly from a Christian point of view, we have in the Old Testament probably the pinnacle of Israel at the time was under Solomon. And Solomon built this massive temple. It's detailed very much about the materials that were used and the processes which Solomon used to build this temple. And then to contrast to that, if we look to the New Testament, we have the book of Acts, where there is no temple, and the early church after Jesus' death and resurrection, they meet from house to house with gladness. So there's that absence of a building in which they come to, although they came to Solomon's porch occasionally. So they went from building to building without a church in the New Testament. And in the Old Testament, they had this massive temple in which they went to worship. If I had to ask you, Ralph, where on the spectrum of formality does your faith and worship fall? Would it be more Solomon or would it be more Book of Acts?
Way close to Solomon. On the other hand, if we're talking, it's interesting that the word acts came in there. If we see somebody in distress in the street and we see somebody else go to their aid and look after them, I think one's faith is very much in that, because that gives you another kind of joy, just to see that kindness and have my that kind of thing, and in the same way as one feels awe at seeing such a beautiful place. I was at Durham Cathedral in Durham Cathedral Choir for 2 years before King's, and that was unbelievable, very, very powerful place. So and yet one could come out of the place like this and see somebody begging, terrible place. And one of my great heroes of all time is St. Francis, who was immensely compassionate and a very, very powerful, but nonetheless gentle personality. So I can't answer that except to say that between those two polarities is the answer.
I think it's very interesting. The letter that James writes in the second half of the New Testament talks a lot about faith versus acts, and how if you have faith, you will do the acts, you will do the works. So I find that very interesting. And then, Ralph, when you're sat as a congregant member having just sung, what is it that you're thinking, having played a part in the service? Do you think, as you come off the front of the church, whew, that's me done, time to relax? Or do you still very much see the receiving and listening of the teaching, having sung, as part of the service?
Very much the latter. My parents were churchgoers, and my father had been an atheist and became a theist over a few years in his 20s. And my mother was convinced Christian all her life. So I recognize the great mystery. And so I do remain in an elevated state when I've conducted a choir and have loved the piece that's going on. I adore the teamwork for a start. I love the fact that everybody's doing the same thing at the same time. Amazing. And want to. Nobody says, I don't want to sing at the same time as everyone else, so I'm going to sing slightly behind. Everybody wants to do the same thing together. And together, if we're singing great music, that's doubly good. And then if we're in this beautiful place with lovely thoughts being read from a Bible or whatever afterwards, wonderful. So the whole thing adds up for me, yes.
You simplified in a video once about the difference between the two parts of the brain when it comes to music. I was wondering whether you could explain that, because I thought that was fascinating.
Well, thank you for having listened to that. One of the most important things, I've been a music teacher all my life, that's it. I teach music. And one of the most important things I learned about it was when they were investigating the brain. And this was probably the early 90s. I may be wrong. But I remember a Canadian lady who was doing tests on the brain and seeing which parts of the brain were active for different sort of things. And she found that when people got excited about music, it lit up a certain part of the brain. And when people played music and were good at it and it was complex, it lit up a different part of the brain. In other words, the part of the brain for being good at music is completely separate from the part of the brain for loving music. So that's why, as a music teacher, I have to understand that people can absolutely love music but not be very good at it. So it's my duty, my solemn duty, to give them a chance to do it and make sure their musical needs are fully satisfied. And at the other time, to deal tactfully with parents who are upset that their highly talented child isn't practicing because that child may be good at it. We so much wanted to be musical yeah, absolutely. I know you would love it if your child was musical. Your child is musical, but they just don't want to do it quite so much as you would like. And so some children are not so enthusiastic about it. However, don't get me wrong, some would be more excited about it if they did do it a bit more practice. So there is a middle way.
And Ralph, I hear about these lovely courses in which you run in the summer. What is it that you're up to there?
Thank you for asking that. It was 1980. I got fed up because in the middle of the summer holidays, because I did school choirs, there was no choir to conduct. So I started a course. And of course, it's to help people and to help people applying to cathedrals and universities to be choral scholars. And in those days, it was Oxford and Cambridge. Now it's all manner of different people. But now my courses, I was just calculating today, we're on the 222nd course now. There are junior courses, so from 7 right up to adult courses as well now. But they started off as 18 to 21-year-olds. And we absolutely concentrate on doing the best music, as defined by me, of course, and learning to read. So everything is read. Nobody feels out of their depth, though. Nobody feels intimidated, because the team known as the choir is, I think, the best team in the world. Well, I would. But it's a good team because somebody who's perhaps not quite so experienced at others won't feel intimidated. And somebody who's very good at it and a leader won't feel held back, because they're all doing it together and they're doing it as a team, and it's lovely music. So this is what we do in choral courses, and they're called Rodolfus choral courses, Rodolfus. People get that spelling wrong. Rodolfus, Rodolfus. And there's some this summer, and there are some going on all summers. And I don't know anybody who doesn't have a good time on them. And many, many people talk to me years later about how it changed their lives.
And then, Ralph, just as we come to a close, I was wondering if you could give us all a parting gift of instructing us how to sing Happy Birthday correctly, because a lot of us have been doing it wrong by starting too high. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. Please, people, whenever anybody is celebrating a birthday, they are, of course, excited. And it's lovely that we're excited, because we're excited for somebody else, which is the best kind of excitement, and it gives one the most joy. So you tend to go, happy, and start happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy, and then you make a filthy noise up high. So if I hear this happening in a party, I wait for just the right moment and start on a low note. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Charlie. Happy birthday to you. And make sure it starts slow. And you can do it if you get in at just the right time, when people say, oh, it's David's birthday. Here we go. You go happy and start off just before them. You can make them all sing low down. But it's lovely we've got that, for good. It was originally "Good Morning to You," American song, and they changed one little phrase, "Happy birthday, dum da da," and so somebody was able to claim the rights on that, and has been earning lots of money just by that little dum ba da dee dee.
Wow!
That's why you never hear anybody sing "Happy Birthday" on films or television. You'd think, oh, it's their birthday, let's all sing. They don't do it because it costs such a lot to perform it. I'm not sure when it comes out of a copyright, but it was originally a song, an American song, "Good morning to you, good morning to you," and somebody came along and put "Happy birthday to you," so they got the rights.
Wow. So from Handel to Taylor Swift, Solomon to the modern day Happy Birthday, I feel like we have covered a lot of ground. Ralph, Thank you so much for coming on to the show. You've been an absolute delight. Undoubtedly, the first and only person to break mid-recording to go play on the piano.
Really, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed that.